Financial Planner, Flow on YouTube.
The world is about to change, and most are completely unaware of this fact. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Yesterday, I uploaded an interview with Lynette Zhang. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, or you can go to x22report.com. Just scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side. You can play the video on the site, or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side, and you can play the video there, or go to Steemit. You can go to steemit.com/@X22Report. You can play the video on Steemit. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, in the past couple of days, since Trump came out and said something about those players that kneel during the NFL games, during the national anthem, we can see there's quite a backlash against the NFL. There are individuals that are burning their jerseys right now. We also now see that there are sponsors that are beginning to pull their ad dollars from the NFL. And at least one major company right now has pulled the company's advertising and sponsorship money. This is coming from Jones, the CEO of Payday Lending, Chain Check into Cash, and owner of Hardwick Clothes, America's oldest suit maker. And he looked at what's going on. He's saying, listen, we can't be a part of this. Now, as a reminder, the league and its 32 teams make around $1.25 billion from corporate partners and advertisers last year. And what we're seeing at this point is that a lot of these sponsors, a lot of these companies, they might be pulling a lot more from the NFL. And at this point, we can see that this is the backlash. When you do something like this, the people are going to speak out, sponsors are going to speak out, and that's how you know, if what you're doing resonates with the people or doesn't resonate with the people. And we're starting to see that maybe this doesn't resonate with the people right now. We see the corporate media is bashing Trump, saying that he's not helping Puerto Rico, and actually Trump is helping Puerto Rico. He ordered the Jones Act to be waived for shipments to the hurricane area of Puerto Rico immediately. The 1920 Jones Act requires shipments of goods between two U.S. ports to be made with American flag vessels only, and now other ships flying different flags can come in and drop off goods in Puerto Rico. And we can see right now that this is desperately needed in this area because the people there are really suffering. We see that Wall Street and the City of London and the banking system, they're very worried about Catalonia, and they're worried about there might be maybe some type of black swan that might occur during this period if the referendum goes through. And in recent days, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, ING have warned about the political situation in Spain's area, Catalonia, where they're saying that this might be a major problem economically. And of course, what they're worried about is their investments, what they can control. Is Catalonia going to have their own banking system? Are they going to separate themselves from the private Western central banking system? This is what they're really worried about. And this is why they're bringing this up. This is why they're making a big deal. And of course, they want the country to stay together. And again, the referendum is coming up October 1st, and we're going to have to watch to see how this all plays out. We also see that the sanctions against Russia, when Obama was president, they created the Russian sanctions, and it looks like the sanctions aren't really having an effect on Russia whatsoever. But it did create problems in the EU. It weakened the EU in its competition against America. So you need to look at this and say, well, was this really the plan? Because Russia really wasn't competing with the United States, and the sanctions really didn't do much. They lowered the gas prices, the oil prices to hit Russia. That hit them a little bit. But the EU and what they delivered and traded with Russia, it really hit these countries very, very hard, and it allowed the U.S. to do more business, which is kind of odd. So you have to wonder, was this planned so the EU would have trouble and the United States could step in and take up some of the slack? And we see that yeah, maybe this was the original plan, and maybe the plan wasn't really to hurt Russia because they knew the sanctions weren't going to hurt Russia. Even the sanctions that are placed on the individuals in Russia, that really didn't do anything. Now we see that NATO, well, it might be splintering right now. Germany completes withdrawal from the Turkey's Incirlik air base. They've moved their military equipment to Jordan right now. And we can see a lot of the NATO partners, they are in the air base in Jordan. And we can see that Turkey is moving closer and closer to Russia, further away from NATO. And again, this is going to be a problem going forward because the world is changing right now. A lot of people don't know this, but the world is changing. I mean, think about what's happening right now. Syria, well, Russia and the elected president there, they have control of the country. Libya, they want the U.S. out. Iraq doesn't want the U.S. there. They're making deals with Iran and Russia and China. The Middle East is falling right now. The cabal has lost control of this area. Venezuela will be trading using the yuan, not the dollar. And we can see that the Belt and Road, a lot of countries are joining up with this because this is going to be the new trading system. And the world is changing very, very quickly. The reserve currency of the world, the dollar, is imploding on itself, and countries are moving away from it. And we've talked about this many, many times before. And what's happening right now, very slowly, everything that we talked about, it's all happening right now. And most of the people, well, they're sleeping through all of this. They don't realize that there's this huge amount of change happening. And I think a lot of people are going to be shocked when this change does happen, when the reset happens, the transition happens. They're not going to know what's going on because they've been told that the economy is doing well, everything's fine, go out and spend, everything is great. This is what they've been told for the last 8-9 years. And for all intents and purposes, they created this illusion that everything was fine, and when everything falls apart in a split second, people are going to be shocked, especially when things change here in the United States, in Canada, throughout Europe, and the way of life actually changes, and the United States is no longer the reserve currency. This is when things start to really get crazy and people don't understand what's going on, and we're going to be going through this probably very, very soon. We see out in Libya right now, we know that Trump put on these, he added additional travel bans, and Libya is one of the countries, and we can see the Eastern leadership by General Haftar is saying that they are banning U.S. citizens in the eastern part of Libya. And we can see that they're doing this because of the travel ban. Now, do we really need the travel ban at this point? I really don't think so. But what's very interesting about all of this is that the cabal is transferring the Islamic State, the paid mercenaries that were in Syria and Iraq, over to Libya to try to take back Libya. Because, again, we have this government that was created by the U.S. and the UN. The people didn't elect this government, and they're trying to have this government take control of the country. But we have many different factions within Libya, and they're rejecting the UN government. So it looks like they're bringing in the Islamic State to try to push the agenda there. But what's very interesting is that the Libyan rival parties, they're holding peace talks in Tunisia. Now, the United States, the cabal, they don't want this to happen. They don't want all the rival factions talking to each other and making an agreement and saying, you know something, we don't want the UN-backed government in there. We will handle the country ourselves. Because once this happens, guess what? Well, they're going to move closer and closer to China and Russia. They'll be dealing outside of the dollar, and then this will just be another country doing the same thing as Syria is going to be doing, the same thing as Iraq is doing, the same thing as Venezuela is going to be doing, and the rest of the countries, they're going to be joining in on all of this. Now, we know that the Kurdish referendum went through, and they're saying that, yes, 90% want to split off from Iraq and Syria, and Russia is out there, and the Russian Foreign Ministry is saying that we reject the Iraqi Kurdish breakaway, and we don't want this to happen. Now, the reason for this is because they know that this was pushed by the United States, the cabal, to make sure that they get their piece of land and create chaos in this region. Now, Iraq, they've deployed troops to Kirkuk after the referendum, and we can see that things might get a little crazy. But what's very interesting is that the Syria's deputy prime minister and foreign minister has stated that once the conflict against terrorist groups is finished in Syria, well, maybe we can discuss or politically negotiate internal autonomy for the Syrian Kurds. Now, there are several geopolitical implications to this statement. One, seizing the initiative from the U.S. occupiers first and foremost. Basically, he's going to be taking the wind out of the sails of the United States, of the cabal, and saying, listen, yeah, we'll talk about this, but let's just wait a minute. Let's wait until we get all the terrorists out of the country, and this way we can sit down and talk about it, and this will kind of, push back on the cabal and what they're trying to do right now. Two, by doing this, they can tell, listen, we can have these negotiations, but we need to separate the Syrian Democratic Forces, the moderate rebels, from the civilian Kurd population. And this will allow them to separate all these groups. So in exchange for negotiating autonomy, they can say this is one of the prerequisites before we do anything else. So what we're seeing here is that by Syria announcing this message, it sends a strong message to the Kurds and the United States. The message is clear. Syria is a sovereign country, and the Kurdish issue is purely an internal matter. The United States doesn't need to be involved in this. The coalition forces don't need to be involved in this. Is the United States in Catalonia? No. They're not there. So at this point, they are trying to get rid of the cabal in this area. Russia's already saying, listen, we don't need the coalition forces in Syria. Iraq is saying we don't want the forces there whatsoever. And we can see right now, everything is changing. And as this change continues and the cabal continually loses their grip, which we can see happening all over the world, the only grip they have left is creating propaganda out of the corporate media. The corporate media really doesn't report on anything. They just throw out propaganda. They make people believe in what they want them to believe, but they don't really tell them what's really going on around the world. And what we see happening right now is everything that we've been talking about. There is a huge amount of change happening right now. Change is happening all around the world, and you need to be ready and prepared, because if you're not ready and prepared, well, you're going to be sucked into this and you're not going to know what's going on. You're going to be running to the supermarkets. You're going to be running all over the place to try to get your supplies, because there is going to be an economic collapse, transition, and the dollar is going to be changed. They might still call it a dollar. Some people are saying it's going to be a dollar coin. It's going to be a crypto type of currency. Other people are saying it's going to be something completely different. Other people are saying that the main currency the world is going to use is the SDRs, and the central banks are going to be using the SDRs to have trade across the countries, and each country will have their local currency, which they will then use. But in that scenario, the central banks still have control. And remember, the central banks, they have no allegiance to a country or group or anything like that. They don't care about that, because as long as they can control the creation of currency and loan this currency to different countries, they have control over them. How do they have control? Well, look at Greece, for instance. They're in debt. They have to listen to the central banks. No matter what they do there, they have to listen to what they say. If they want austerity, Greece has to abide by that policy, or they won't receive any more currency. And if they tell them they have to sell off some of their assets, guess what? Greece has to sell off some of their assets. So once they place all these countries into debt, they have full and total control over these countries. Right now, here in the United States, the Fed and the United States are kind of intertwined right now. Once this breaks apart and the central bank is no longer intertwined with the government, we can't create currency anymore. And that's going to be a huge problem. There's going to have to be an adjustment here in this country, because look at all the entitlement programs. Look how much money the government makes. Things are going to have to change drastically. Am I saying it's going to be for the better? Most likely not. Actually, it'll probably be a lot worse. And we can see that the central banks, they have been pushing this, preparing this, because they want total control of the system. And it looks like we're headed in this direction, unless the people rise up and say no to the central bank. And a lot of people don't know about the central bank. A lot of people don't realize what they're trying to do. And we can see that this is their main type of operation. Now, with the TPP, which was struck down by Trump, they wanted to have another level of taking control of the countries by having a court system above the government. But that didn't work out. But they'll stick with controlling the creation of currency right now because this gives them a lot of control. And eventually what they're going to try to do is bring that whole, type of legislation back where they would have control of different governments by having a court system above their government level. Now, they might do this through the UN, but we can see right now they have to take a step back because things are changing dramatically. And once again, we're going to go through a transition. You need to be ready. You need to be prepared, and you need to make sure that you protect yourself. Try to protect your family. A lot of people won't listen right now. They don't believe. But whatever you can do what you can. Make sure that you're protected. Make sure your family's protected. Protect your wealth. Make sure you have food supplies, because we're going to go through this very, very rough period, and everyone needs to be ready for what is coming.